So another topic that we will discuss today is non-traditional security threats. And as we know that today is Earth Day, and so we will be discussing the problem of environment and climate challenge in international politics today. We have been discussing post-Cold War politics in past some classes, and here again we will be doing the same because climate challenge rose before international society post-Cold War politics more seriously, more challengingly. In fact, the end of the Cold War and the apparent end of the military fear and threat to the West led to new ways of thinking about international issues and threats. Now that Cold War was not there, superpower conflict was not there, the world started thinking about new kinds of security threats. And though states remained key players in international system, we see that security has become a lesser concern in its classical meaning, which is physical security, national security. Interstate conflicts are less today, and it is believed that due to various reasons, like we had discussed in the previous address, that wars will diminish because of globalization, because of nuclear deterrent, because of end of Cold War, because of public opinion, etc. So interstate conflicts are a lesser threat today, and there are certain non-traditional security threats which have gained more importance. A new security agenda has evolved, driven by international organizations, NGOs and transnational corporations. तो आज हम क्या देखते हैं कि नई तरीके के जो सुरक्षा के मुद्दे हैं वो उत्पन्न हो गए हैं, और इन मुद्दों को लाने वाले कौन है सामने? जो हमारी टीएनसीज हैं, ट्रांसनेशनल कंपनीज हैं, या एनजीओज हैं, या अदर इंटरनेशनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस हैं. They are posing and throwing these challenges before the world community. And it is being realized that there are transnational threats to international peace and security. आज राष्ट्रों को जो थ्रेट्स है वो बहुराष्ट्रीय है. जैसे आज ही जो पेंडेमिक है वो एक ऐसी थ्रेट है जो सभी राष्ट्रों को प्रभावित कर रही है. क्लाइमेट चेंज किसी देश के अंदर की घटना नहीं है, उसका प्रभाव पूरे विश्व पर पड़ता है. अगर आर्कटिक सर्कल में आइस पिघलेगी तो उसका प्रभाव पूरे विश्व पर पड़ेगा. अगर समुद्र का जल बढ़ेगा, अगर एसिडिक रेन फ्रांस में होगी तो उसका प्रभाव दूसरे देशों पर भी पड़ेगा. तो आज जो समस्याएं हैं वो ट्रांसनेशनल हैं. They are crossing national boundaries. They are not confined to one state. और इसलिए आज ये जो थ्रेट्स हैं एनवायरनमेंट की वो इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी के लिए एक मुद्दा बन गई है. ये जो शिफ्ट था फ्रॉम traditional security threats to non-traditional security threats, it was recognized formally by United Nations after it published its report on human development in 1994, where human development was insisted upon. जहां मानव विकास की, मानव सुरक्षा, ह्यूमन सिक्योरिटी की बात की गई. Today we see that many countries are very much ahead in gross national happiness, and these countries may be very small, very less developed countries. जैसे हम देखते हैं कि भूटान या फिनलैंड, नॉर्वे, ये ऐसे देश हैं जो ग्रॉस नेशनल हैप्पीनेस में कहीं आगे हैं उन देशों से जो अत्यंत विकसित हैं. क्यों? क्योंकि वहाँ ह्यूमन डेवलपमेंट पर जोर दिया जा रहा है, न कि ग्रॉस नेशनल डेवलपमेंट पर. यानी रिसोर्सेस की जब हम बात करते हैं तो ह्यूमन रिसोर्सेस वहाँ पर अधिक महत्वपूर्ण है. तो वहाँ जीडीपी की बात नहीं होती है, बल्कि ग्रॉस हैप्पीनेस इंडेक्स की बात की जाती है, ग्रॉस हैप्पीनेस डेवलपमेंट की बात की जाती है. So these non-traditional security threats were recognized by a report published by United Nations in 1994. And this report made the policymakers aware of the fact that some of the most serious risks facing states in the modern world arise from transnational problems. What are these transnational problems? Poverty, garibi, famine, akal, disease, just as you are seeing today, you are witnessing, disease and environmental degradation. So poverty, famine, disease, environmental degradation, ये कैसी प्रॉब्लम्स हैं? ये ट्रांसनेशनल प्रॉब्लम्स हैं और इनसे आज के विश्व को बड़ा खतरा है, उनकी सिक्योरिटी को खतरा है. So we identify some non-traditional security threats, and we can term them as climate change, human health, resource scarcity, a very major problem today because we see that population is continuously increasing, and increasing population is consuming the limited resources that the world has. जो ऐसे लोग हैं जो एनवायरनमेंट की रक्षा की बात करते हैं, वो राइजिंग पॉपुलेशन को लेकर भी चिंतित होते हैं और पॉपुलेशन कंट्रोल की बात कहते हैं. So increasing population and limited resources, scarce resources. Here, energy security and problems arising from changing demographies. These are some non-traditional threats being faced by the countries today, by the global society today. We will discuss them one by one. And first of all, we will take climate change. What is climate change? The ecological consequences of human-induced climate change is the most worrisome item on security agenda. Humans have affected the environment in which they have been living for millennia. And for the past almost several years, about 500 years, human impact has ranged from expansion of agricultural land use to reduction of forests and wetlands to a rapid rise in the amount of fossilized carbon released back into the atmosphere through the burning of fossil fuels. So we see that in the past 500 years, A lot of environmental degradation has taken place because of rising population, because of deforestation, because we are claiming more and more land for agricultural purpose because population is rising. And it has also been observed that world has more than it can feed its total population. यानी हमने कहीं ज्यादा अर्थ से लेने का काम किया है जिसकी जरूरत नहीं थी. Although we have been talking of sustainable development for the past several years, but we also know that states shy away from taking responsibility when it comes to reducing their carbon footprints. States uh, want their development. They need to develop to come ahead in this competitive world, and so they don't want any other state or any other forum to dictate them and tell them as to what they should do. So there is this reservation also, because of which environment has been continuously going downhill, and a lot of concern, a lot of meetings, a lot of you can say debates have been raging on this. Until recently, only a few scientists were willing to commit to the theory that human resource use is having an appreciable effect on Earth's natural systems. Because you know that when we say that burning of coal, oil, and gas, all these are impacting the environment adversely, as soon as one says that, there springs up a lobby which refutes these claims. Of course, these lobbies are sponsored by oil and gas companies. So what we see that there is a debate on what is the solution to this environmental degradation, what human beings should do to reduce this adverse impact on climate. And all this debate on climate change brings a host of potential threats to states, non-state actors, and individuals. Rising sea levels caused by the melting of land-based polar ice caps threaten coastal areas. As you know, that there are countries which are in danger of getting drowned, and they have been raising this issue at the World Forum. In fact, if I remember correctly, then the cabinet of Maldives held its meeting underwater just to bring it to the notice of the world that the global warming is causing the rise in the level of the sea. And if the sea rises, Maldives has a threat to its very identity. It will be drowned. Thus, there are countries which have a very existential threat because of global warming, because of other climatic changes. And this climate change, in fact, forms the very core of their national interest. Then we can see many other problems arising out of this climate change. Like rising sea temperatures are affecting weather patterns and fish population. Then we have more likelihood of storms. Rainfall is changing its pattern. When the months in which we in India used to expect rains, they are going dry. So rainfall pattern has changed a lot. Then there are unprecedented droughts and flash floods in areas where they shouldn't have been. Like in Rajasthan, we had flash floods, which caused a lot of havoc because Rajasthan its soil is not equipped to be flooded. So we have all these problems because of climatic change. Also, when climate changes, human migration also happens because people migrate from once fertile land to which have now become either flooded or parched or even submerged by our changing planet, and they tend to move to greener pastures. So there is bound to be human migration, which will change the demography of the world. So all this leads us to the question as to how do the problems of environment and climate change impact international relations. We all know that why it is happening and how it can be solved. This is a debate which should be done by the ecologists. International relation needs to deal with international consequences of climate change and its immediate effects. तो अब हमें ये देखना है कि अंतरराष्ट्रीय राजनीति में क्लाइमेट चेंज का क्या प्रभाव पड़ रहा है. So far, we can say the international community has focused on two parts of climate change, or we can say climate change puzzle. One is mitigation and the other is adaptation. Mitigation efforts focus on reducing the amount of carbon entering the atmosphere in the hope that it will minimize the severity of climate change. Adaptation efforts focus on protecting ourselves from its worst effects by protecting coastlines, building more resilient communities, and ensuring a sustainable source of food and power. So, adaptation has led to sustainable development. A lot has been written on it, much has been done regarding it. Like we have Kyoto Protocol, which was signed in 1997. Then in 2015, we had Paris Agreement regarding climate. So these efforts were made in the process of adaptation. Now, we should also discuss how international relation has contributed to this climate debate. अंतर्राष्ट्रीय राजनीति का क्या इसमें योगदान रहा है. पर्यावरण में जो सुरक्षा, पर्यावरण परिवर्तन ने जो विश्व की सुरक्षा के लिए खतरा उत्पन्न किया है. International relation has contributed to the climate change debate by identifying international constraints on actors' ability to deal with environmental issues. Who are actors in international relation? Of course, states. तो states के ऊपर क्या पाबंदियां हैं, क्या उनके ऊपर लिमिटेशंस हैं, ये आइडेंटिफाई करने का काम किया है IR थ्योरिस्ट ने, जिससे ये जाना जा सके कि why states are hesitant in taking steps with regard to modifying or with regard to remedifying the adverse effects of climate change. And one of these constraints relates to the great divide that still separates the economy of haves and have-nots. There are still two kinds of states, haves and have-nots. In theory, all states agree about climate change. But when it comes to practicality, many developing states fear that limits on carbon emission will impair their ability to catch up with the developed world. They started late in the process of development, and they need to make utmost use of technology and resources so that they can catch up with the developed world in the development. And if limitations are put on their carbon emissions, then their this quest for development will be hampered. Also, they feel that a forum, international forum, telling them to do something or not to do something will be a constraint on their sovereignty, and they are not ready to compromise their sovereignty. In fact, uh, China, which is today an emerging superpower, has been hesitant and it has maintained that the targets should not be imposed on it regarding carbon emissions as long as it has a per capita income less than the Western world, because it needs development. So we can see that developing countries are more concerned about this. EU and Japan are not much worried when climatic forums tell them to reduce their carbon footprint, etc. Even in US, it is a matter of concern. Here, transnational companies, corporations have access to lobbies of Congress, congressional lobbies, and through these lobbies, they oppose environmental regulations that may be before the Congress. So that is why we see that America is not very insistent on environmental regulations, and in fact, Trump had uh, took America out of Paris climate change forum. So we see that states differ on the issue of climate change and the way it should be handled. However, recently we have seen that US and China both have agreed to come together and sit and find some solution to this problem, and they have actively agreed to participate in efforts for global mitigation and adaptation targets. And they believe, they have said that they believe that these targets can be achieved through institutions like United Nations. So क्लाइमेट चेंज जो एक बड़ी समस्या है जिसने संपूर्ण विश्व के लिए एक सिक्योरिटी थ्रेट, कुछ के लिए तो ये एग्जिस्टेंस का ही प्रश्न हो जाता है। ऐसी स्थिति में ये बहुत जरूरी है कि पर्यावरणीय सुरक्षा का जो मुद्दा है उसको पूर्ण महत्व देते हुए, उसको ध्यान देते हुए और अंतर्राष्ट्रीय राजनीति में उस पर गंभीरता से विचार किया जाए। I hope this much you are able to understand